He invited a homeless alien girl to spend the night, and had the strangest night of his life. The smell of coffee filled the cabin. Daniel Reed leaned over the small stove, watching the dark liquid drip into his mug. The old machine hissed and rattled in rhythm with the wind outside. The storm had been raging for hours, sweeping dust and rain across the barren frontier. Daniel lifted the mug to his lips and took a slow sip. It was bitter, but warm. Out here, that was good enough. He stared at the flame for a while, listening to the wind howl against the walls. Nights like this reminded him how empty the world had become. Then came a sound he did not expect. A knock. 3 short raps against the door, faint but sharp. Daniel froze. The mug hung in his hand. No one ever knocked here. No one even came this far out. For a moment he thought it was just the storm, but then it came again, louder, hurried, desperate. He set the cup down quietly and reached for the old rifle propped against the wall. His heartbeat quickened. Years of soldiering had trained him to move in silence, and even now, long after leaving that life behind, the instincts returned without thought. He stepped toward the door. Another knock, then a voice. "Please, please open the door." It was not human. The voice was light, almost musical, but trembling with fear. Daniel hesitated. No one sane traveled in weather like this. He pulled the latch halfway and opened the door just a crack. The cold wind rushed in, biting against his skin. A figure stood there in the storm. She was small, soaked through from the rain, her long dark hair plastered to her face. Her skin shimmered faintly in the lantern light, a pale blue with a silver sheen that caught his breath. Her clothes were torn, clinging to her as she shivered violently. Daniel's grip tightened on the rifle. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Her glowing silver eyes lifted to his. "Please," she said softly, her lips trembling. "I just need shelter. One night. I will leave by morning." The rain hammered harder on the roof. She looked ready to collapse. For a long moment, Daniel stood silent, torn between caution and compassion. Finally, he lowered the rifle. "Come in." She stepped past him, almost stumbling as she crossed the threshold. The warmth of the small cabin hit her like a wave. Water dripped from her clothes, pooling on the wooden floor. Daniel shut the door behind her, sealing out the roar of the storm. The alien woman stood there, catching her breath. Up close, she was striking, almost unnaturally so. Her face was smooth, elegant, her silver eyes reflecting the firelight like stars. Daniel nodded toward the small stool near the heater. "Sit down. You are freezing." She obeyed without a word, crouching close to the fire. Her hands hovered near the flame as though she could not believe the warmth was real. Daniel poured another mug of coffee and handed it to her. "Here," he said simply. She looked at the cup, then at him, uncertain. "I thank you." Her voice was soft, the words careful, as though she was unused to kindness. He gave a short nod. "Do not thank me yet. You have not told me what brings you out here." The alien took a small sip, closing her eyes as the warmth spread through her. "I am traveling," she said finally. "I lost my way in the storm." Daniel studied her for a long moment. "That is not the whole truth." Her eyes flickered up at him, startled. For a moment she looked like she might bolt. Then she sighed, her shoulders sagging. "No, it is not." He waited, but she said nothing more. The fire crackled softly. Daniel leaned back against the wall and crossed his arms. "Fine," he said. "Keep your secrets. Just know that if you brought trouble here, it will find you faster than you think." "I know," she whispered. "It always does." For a while, neither spoke. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, only the sound of the fire filled the silence. The alien's trembling slowed, the color returning to her cheeks. Finally, Daniel asked, "Do you have a name?" "Celine," she said quietly. "And you?" "Daniel." She nodded once. "Thank you, Daniel." He picked up his own cup again, the bitter coffee long gone cold. "Do not thank me yet," he said again. "Morning is still a long way off." Her silver eyes met his across the firelight, calm now, but still hiding something deep beneath. He could not tell if it was fear, sorrow, or both. All he knew was that his quiet night had ended, and whatever had arrived at his door was about to change everything. Outside, thunder rolled like distant drums, and in that lonely cabin, two strangers shared the silence. One human, one alien. Both carrying secrets they were not ready to speak. The storm did not ease. Hours passed, and the wind continued to beat against the windows like an angry tide. Daniel had offered Celine a dry towel and an old jacket that used to fit him years ago. It hung loose on her small frame, but she seemed grateful. She sat near the fire while he prepared something to eat. There was not much in his pantry, just dried meat, a few vegetables, and some ration bars left over from his service days. Still, the smell of cooking filled the cabin, cutting through the cold. Celine watched him quietly, her eyes following every movement. When he finally placed a small bowl in front of her, she blinked as though she had forgotten what food even looked like. "You can eat," Daniel said simply. "Are you sure?" she asked, almost hesitant. He gave a short nod and took his own bowl. "If I were not, I would not have served it." That seemed to amuse her. A faint smile touched her lips, the first he had seen. "You are very direct, Daniel Reed." He glanced at her. "Comes with age and bad experiences." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The sound of the fire and the rain were the only voices in the room. But Daniel could feel her eyes on him more than once, studying him. Finally, she spoke again. "You live alone here?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Long enough." She tilted her head slightly. "Long enough to forget what conversation feels like?" Daniel looked up, surprised by the question. For a moment he said nothing. Then he set his spoon down. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But solitude has its uses. No one to disappoint. No one to bury." Her expression softened. "You have lost people." "We all have," he replied, his voice even. "That is how you end up here on the edge of nowhere." She looked into the fire, her face illuminated by its light. "Then we are not so different." He studied her carefully. "You said you are running from people who want you dead." Celine nodded faintly. "Yes." "Why?" She hesitated. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. "Because I know things I should not," she said finally. "And because I am not supposed to exist." Daniel frowned. "Not supposed to exist?" Her silver eyes lifted to meet his, steady and unblinking. "Not anymore." It was an answer that told him nothing but felt heavy with meaning. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the tension in her hands. Whatever she was hiding, it had worn her down to the bone. He decided not to press her further. She needed rest more than interrogation. After they finished eating, Daniel cleared the dishes and set them aside. When he turned back, Celine was standing by the window, staring out into the dark. The lightning flickered against her reflection. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You can take the cot near the fire." She turned her head slightly, her eyes soft. "And you?" "I will manage." Celine hesitated, as if she wanted to argue, then nodded. She pulled the blanket around herself and sat down on the cot. The warmth of the fire wrapped her like a fragile promise of safety. Daniel poured himself another cup of coffee and sat back down at the table. For a while, he watched the rain race down the glass. The storm was finally beginning to fade. Behind him, Celine shifted slightly, her voice low. "Thank you for letting me in. You looked like you were freezing to death," Daniel said. "Most would have closed the door," she murmured. "Most are not me." She smiled faintly, her eyes closing. "Then I am lucky it was you." Daniel said nothing. The rhythm of her breathing slowed, soft and even. Within minutes, she was asleep. He looked at her, at the faint glow beneath her skin, the way the firelight danced over her features. She looked peaceful now, but something about her presence unsettled him. He could not shake the feeling that she was not what she seemed. There was too much poise in her movements, too much grace in the way she held herself, even when exhausted. He had seen refugees before, broken and desperate. She was different, like a wild creature forced to hide its crown. The thought made him sigh. He pushed it aside and turned back to the window. Outside, the world was still dark. But through the storm, Daniel saw movement. Shadows slipping between the trees, faint shapes too organized to be beasts. He narrowed his eyes. His gut clenched. Old instincts returned. He had seen that kind of movement before back in the war. Predators. Hunters. He stood slowly, setting his coffee aside. His eyes flicked to Celine, still sleeping peacefully near the fire. If those shapes were real, they had not come for him. They had come for her. The sound came first. A faint crunch outside, almost buried beneath the wind. Then another, closer this time. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He moved to the wall and pulled the old rifle from its hooks, checking the chamber by instinct. He glanced at Celine. She was still asleep, her breathing calm, the fire's glow tracing soft light across her blue skin. He did not want to wake her, but something inside him whispered that she was the reason danger had found him. He slipped to the window and looked out through a narrow crack. At first, all he saw was darkness and rain. Then lightning flashed, and for a single second the shapes became clear. Figures, armored, moving low and fast between the trees. 3 of them. No, 4. Daniel's jaw tightened. They carried plasma rifles. Whoever they were not common thieves. He turned back and crossed the cabin in 2 strides. "Celine," he whispered sharply. She stirred, blinking awake. "What is it? Get down. Do not make a sound." Confusion crossed her face, but she obeyed, slipping from the cot to the floor. Daniel moved to the window again. Another flash of light showed the attackers spreading out, taking positions. They were surrounding the cabin. "Who are they?" he hissed. Celine's face went pale. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Hunters." "From where?" "The Dominion," she said. "They found me." Before Daniel could ask another question, the first shot hit. The glass shattered beside him, spraying shards across the floor. The energy blast tore through the stove, sending sparks flying. "Down!" he barked, shoving Celine behind the table. He dropped to one knee and returned fire through the window. The rifle kicked hard against his shoulder, the sound deafening in the small space. One of the figures outside fell, the glow of his weapon dropping into the mud. Another shot scorched the wall beside Daniel's head. The smell of burning wood filled the room. He ducked and crawled toward the corner. "You picked one hell of a place to spend the night," he growled. Celine's eyes glowed faintly in the flickering firelight. "I did not mean for this to happen. Save it. Grab that knife by the stove. If they come in, use it." She did as he said, her movements sharp and precise. Daniel noticed how quickly she reacted. Not like a helpless traveler, but like someone trained to survive. The door shook under a heavy impact. Then again. On the 3rd hit, it burst inward, splintering into pieces. A masked figure stepped through the smoke, his weapon raised. Daniel fired first. The blast threw the attacker backward into the mud outside. Another shadow leaped through the broken doorway, rolling across the floor. Daniel swung the rifle around, but before he could pull the trigger, Celine moved. In one smooth motion, she struck with the knife, catching the attacker across the neck. He dropped without a sound. Daniel stared at her, stunned. She was breathing hard, her eyes burning silver in the dim light. There was nothing fragile about her now. More footsteps outside. "How many?" he asked. "Too many," she said. "We have to run. Through the back. Move." They darted toward the rear exit, Daniel grabbing his pack from the hook as they passed. Another blast tore through the wall beside them. Splinters flew. He kicked the door open and shoved Celine through first. The rain hit them like ice. They ran. The mud sucked at their boots, the wind howling in their ears. Behind them, the cabin erupted in light as plasma fire ripped through it. The small home that had kept Daniel alive for years went up in flames. They reached the ridge beyond the clearing, gasping for air. Daniel turned, his heart hammering, and watched the fire consume the only home he had left. Celine stood beside him, soaked and shaking. "I am sorry," she whispered. He looked at her, rain running down his face. Start talking. Now. She met his gaze, her expression raw and torn between fear and exhaustion. You deserve the truth, she said. But once I tell you, there is no turning back. I think that ship has already sailed. Celine took a breath, steadying herself. My name is Celine Villari. I am the last living heir to the Villari Dominion. Daniel stared at her, not sure he had heard right. Heir? You mean? Yes, she said softly. I was a princess. My family ruled the Dominion for generations. Until they were murdered. My uncle took the throne by force. I escaped with help from loyal guards. They have been hunting me ever since. The rain fell harder, but her words cut through it like fire. Daniel looked back toward the burning cabin. His quiet life was gone, erased in one night. Why come here? He asked. It was the farthest I could go, she said. The Dominion's reach is long, but I thought, perhaps here, no one would find me. Daniel ran a hand through his wet hair and gave a rough sigh. You were wrong. I was, she admitted, her voice trembling. And now you are in danger because of me. He looked at her for a long moment, the light from the burning cabin flickering in her silver eyes. Maybe, he said quietly, but you are still alive. That has to count for something. Celine looked at him as if she wanted to speak but could not find the words. Behind them, thunder rumbled again. Daniel adjusted his pack and nodded toward the dark ridge ahead. We move before they regroup. If your uncle's men are half as thorough as you say, they will not stop. Celine hesitated, then stepped beside him. Where will we go? He looked out into the storm. Anywhere but here. And together, they disappeared into the night, leaving behind the ashes of his cabin, and the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. The storm followed them for hours, a relentless wall of wind and cold that refused to let go. By dawn, the horizon was a blur of gray and white. The wasteland stretched endlessly in every direction. Frozen valleys, sharp ridges, and the faint outlines of old mining towers half buried in snow. Daniel led the way through the bitter air, his coat pulled tight, rifle slung over his shoulder. Celine followed close behind, her movements slower, her breath misting in the cold. They did not speak at first. There was nothing to say that the silence had not already shouted. By midday, they reached the remains of an old communications outpost. Abandoned, half-collapsed, but still standing enough to give them shelter. Daniel pushed the door open with a grunt, and they stepped inside. Dust and frost coated the floor. This will do, he said quietly. Celine nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Better than dying in the wind. Daniel found a crate near the wall and pulled it closer to the broken heater. He sparked his lighter, coaxing a small flame into life. When warmth finally began to return, he turned to see Celine sitting with her arms wrapped around her knees. Her face was pale, her lips slightly blue. He reached into his pack, pulled out a small ration bar, and handed it to her. Eat. She took it without protest, biting carefully, as though unused to such simple food. After a moment, she said, You did not have to come with me. Daniel sat across from her, his back against the wall. And leave you out there alone? I have made enough mistakes in my life. I am not adding that one. Her silver eyes lifted to his. You would risk your life for someone you just met? He looked at her evenly. I fought for strangers once. It does not change who I am. For a moment, neither spoke. The small flame flickered between them, its light softening the exhaustion etched on their faces. Celine's voice grew quiet. I used to believe that humans were cruel, that you fought for greed and conquest. That was what they taught us in the Dominion. Daniel gave a faint, humorless smile. And now, she said slowly, I see something else. He watched her expression soften, her gaze distant as if seeing memories far away. What happened to your family? He asked. She hesitated, then spoke. My father was a fair ruler. Too fair. He believed peace with humanity was possible. My uncle did not. He gathered support from the military, poisoned the council, and slaughtered everyone loyal to us. Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept speaking. I was taken by my mother's guard, hidden beneath the palace in the old escape tunnels. I heard them, my family, calling out before the sounds stopped. Daniel's chest tightened. You have been running ever since. Celine nodded. For years. I lost count of the worlds I crossed. He wanted to say something that could make that kind of pain lighter, but words felt useless. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small canteen. Drink. You need your strength. She accepted it, her fingers brushing against his hand. The touch was brief but electric. She blinked, startled by it, then looked down. Thank you, she said softly. They sat in silence again, the weight between them shifting. Less fear now, more understanding. As night fell, Daniel found himself watching her in the dim firelight. For someone who had lost everything, she carried herself with quiet strength. Even in exile, even broken, she still looked like a queen without a throne. When she noticed his gaze, she smiled faintly. What are you thinking about? He shook his head. You would not want to know. Try me. I was thinking that you do not look like someone who gives up easily. Celine tilted her head, her dark hair falling over one shoulder. Giving up is easier than hope. But I think, maybe you make hope feel less impossible. Daniel looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the heater. Do not start depending on me, he said. I am not a hero. Neither am I, she whispered. But maybe that is what we both need. The words lingered between them, gentle and dangerous all at once. Later that night, as the storm faded into silence, Celine moved closer to the small fire. Daniel offered her his blanket without thinking. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his again. Daniel, she said softly. He looked at her. Back in the palace, I had everything: silk clothes, servants, fine meals. But I never felt safe, never felt seen. She paused, her silver eyes glimmering in the low light. Tonight, sitting here in this ruined place, I feel more human than I ever did surrounded by gold. Daniel's throat felt tight. Then maybe humanity is contagious. She smiled. A real smile this time, small but warm. Then I am glad I caught it. Outside, the wind finally stilled. The stars appeared through the broken roof, scattering silver light across the cold ground. Celine tilted her head back to look at them. Daniel followed her gaze. The stars stretched endlessly above, cold and bright. I used to look at those and think they meant freedom, he said quietly. And now I think they mean distance. She looked at him, her expression soft. Maybe both. He turned toward her, and for a heartbeat, their eyes met. The silence between them grew heavy, charged. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but the words never came. Instead, she reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against his hand. Daniel did not pull away. For the first time in years, warmth that was not from fire spread through him. They stayed like that for a long moment, two exiles sharing a quiet that no storm could touch. By the next morning, the wind had died completely. Pale sunlight spilled across the snow, touching the ruined outpost with a fragile sense of peace. Daniel stood outside, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes. He had not slept. His instincts, the same instincts that had once kept him alive through war, were awake again. Something felt wrong. The silence was too deep, the air too still. Inside, Celine was packing what little they had. A few rations, a knife, the data crystal she kept hidden close to her chest. When Daniel stepped back in, she looked up, her expression softening slightly. You are worried, she said. I am cautious, Daniel replied. There is a difference. Do you think they found us? Daniel adjusted the strap of his rifle. They always find what they are paid to find. Celine's eyes dimmed, but she did not panic. She only said, Then we keep moving. He gave a small nod. There is a mining settlement about 50 kilometers north. If we can reach it, maybe we can find transport off this frozen rock. They left the outpost just as the clouds began to gather again. Hours passed in silence. The snow crunched beneath their boots, the world endless and white. Celine stumbled once, her strength fading, and Daniel caught her arm before she fell. "You are freezing," he said. "So are you." He gave a short laugh. "I have been worse." She smiled faintly, but he saw the pain in her eyes. She was running out of energy, out of time. They stopped to rest beneath a rocky overhang. Daniel built a small fire and poured what little water they had left into a metal cup to heat. Celine sat close to the flames, her hands trembling as she tried to warm them. Her voice broke the quiet. "Daniel, what will you do when I am gone?" He turned sharply. "Do not talk like that." She looked at him steadily. "You know what I mean. Even if we survive this, even if I reclaim my throne, you belong to another world. You will not follow me into the Dominion." Daniel stared into the fire. "I have nothing left on my world." Celine's expression softened. "You could have peace." "Peace is overrated," he muttered. She reached out, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. "Or maybe you just never found the right reason to want it." Their eyes met, and for a moment the cold, the danger, the war, all of it disappeared. But the sound returned too soon. A faint hum, mechanical and growing louder. Daniel's head snapped up. He stood, scanning the sky, his eyes narrowing. A black shape cut through the clouds. Sleek, fast, moving low. "Dropship," he said. "They found us." Celine's breath caught. "How far?" "Close enough to kill us if we stay here." He grabbed his rifle and pack. "Move." They sprinted through the snow, the ship's engines screaming above them. Bolts of energy scorched the ground nearby, throwing ice and steam into the air. Daniel pushed Celine ahead, shouting, "Keep low!" They dove behind a ridge as another blast hit, throwing him off balance. The world spun in noise and fire. When the smoke cleared, Celine was beside him, unharmed but shaken. Daniel rose to one knee and returned fire. His rifle barked bright blue light, cutting through the wind. One of the ship's engines sparked, and it veered off course before crashing into a frozen slope. The explosion rolled through the valley. Silence followed again, broken only by the hiss of melting ice. Celine looked at him in awe. "You brought down a ship." Daniel reloaded calmly. "Old habits die hard." She smiled despite the chaos. "Remind me not to underestimate humans again." He turned to her, his face hard but his voice quiet. "They will send more. You cannot keep running forever." Her smile faded. "You think I should fight?" "I think you have no choice," Daniel said. "They will never stop hunting you. And hiding will not save you. It will only make you forget who you are." Celine's gaze dropped to the snow. "You sound like my father." Maybe he was right. She looked at him again, her silver eyes sharp now, fire burning behind them. "You would fight with me?" Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Until the end." For a long time neither spoke. The wind swept softly over them, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Then Celine straightened her shoulders, her expression changing. "You are right," she said quietly. "I have run long enough." Daniel gave a small nod. "Then we go south. There is a signal relay near the old capital. If we reach it, maybe you can call whoever still stands with you." She studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You plan like a soldier. I used to be one. Then I will follow your lead, Commander." Daniel chuckled softly. "Do not start calling me that." Her eyes sparkled for the first time in days. "Then what should I call you?" He thought for a moment. "Daniel will do." She smiled again, gentle and warm. "Then lead on, Daniel." And as the two of them set out across the endless white, something in her voice changed. The fear was still there, but beneath it was resolve. A queen's resolve, ready to rise again. The frozen plains gave way to dark forests of steel and glass. Once, this had been the heart of the Valari Dominion, a proud capital that shimmered with towers of crystal and light. Now it was a graveyard of a fallen empire, half buried in snow and silence. Daniel and Celine moved cautiously through the ruins. The storm had quieted, but danger hung heavy in the air. Every echo felt like a footstep behind them. Every shadow seemed to watch. Celine stopped near a fallen statue. The figure's face was cracked and broken, but Daniel could tell it had once been carved in her likeness. Tall, regal, proud. She touched its cold surface with trembling fingers. "My home," she whispered, once filled with laughter. Now only ghosts. Daniel stepped closer. Ghosts can be chased away. You just have to turn on the light again. Celine looked at him, and for a moment her sadness softened. Then she nodded. "The relay is in the central tower. If it still works, I can call the loyalists." They moved quickly. The path was littered with debris and old machines, but Daniel's instincts guided them safely through. When they reached the tower, the great metal doors were half open, frozen in place. Inside, dust floated in the air like mist. Celine knelt beside the relay console, brushing away frost. Her fingers moved fast, entering codes, coaxing power from the ancient circuits. Faint light flickered across the panel. "It still responds," she said, voice shaking with hope. "I can reach them." Daniel stood watch at the entrance, scanning the ruins. The silence felt wrong again. Too deep. "Celine," he said quietly. "Hurry." She nodded and pressed the final command. A burst of light flared across the console, and then voices. Static at first, then faint but growing stronger. "Princess Celine? Is it truly you?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Commander Varric, I live. The throne still has an heir. Where are you? We thought you alive," she interrupted. "Barely, but we will rise again. Rally whoever remains. I am coming home." Daniel smiled faintly at the conviction in her voice. For the first time since that stormy night, he saw not just a fugitive, but a queen. Then the walls shook. A deafening boom tore through the tower. The doors blew open in a blast of fire and smoke. Daniel grabbed Celine and pulled her behind a column as armed soldiers poured in. Mercenaries bearing the insignia of the usurper. The lead soldier stepped forward, his armor gleaming black under the flickering light. His voice was cold and mechanical. "End of the line, Your Highness." Celine stood, defiant despite the fear in her eyes. "You have hunted me across worlds. You took my family, my home. But you will not take my future." The soldier raised his weapon. "Your future ends now." Before he could fire, Daniel moved. He came out of cover like a storm, his rifle roaring, his aim precise. The first wave fell in seconds. Celine joined him, ducking behind a fallen console and firing one of the soldier's own sidearms. Sparks filled the air, metal groaned, and the tower trembled from the chaos. A blast hit Daniel's shoulder, sending him crashing against a pillar. Pain exploded through him, but he gritted his teeth and kept fighting. "Daniel!" Celine screamed. "I am fine," he shouted back. "Keep moving." She crawled toward him as the remaining mercenaries regrouped. Then a voice echoed from behind them, a deep, cruel voice that made Celine freeze. "Well," it said, "the lost princess finally shows herself." Out of the smoke stepped Lord Kale, the traitor who had led the coup, his face marked by scars and arrogance. "You should have stayed dead," Kale sneered. "Now you die properly." Celine rose to her feet. "You murdered my family. You poisoned the Dominion. You call yourself ruler, but you are nothing but a thief." Kale smirked. "And you are nothing but a child playing queen." Daniel pushed himself up, blood staining his sleeve. "Then let me introduce her crown guard." Before Kale could reply, Daniel charged. The two clashed, steel against steel, sparks flying through the cold air. Kale was strong, ruthless, but Daniel fought with purpose. Every strike driven by something deeper than anger. He fought for Celine, for what she had lost, and for what they might build together. Kale landed a blow that sent Daniel staggering. "You fight well for a human," he hissed. Daniel wiped the blood from his lip. "I have had good motivation." He feinted left, then struck hard to the right, driving his blade through Kale's armor. The traitor gasped, eyes wide with disbelief, before collapsing to the floor. Silence fell once more. Celine rushed to Daniel's side, helping him stay upright. He was bleeding heavily, but his smile was calm, proud. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it," she said firmly. By dawn, the loyalists arrived. Word of Celine's return spread through the city like wildfire. Within hours, the banners of the Old Dominion flew again over the towers. And in the grand hall, beneath a ceiling of shattered glass and morning light, Celine stood before her people. She wore the royal sigil across her chest, her silver eyes bright with tears. The court knelt as one. A herald stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the throne awaits." Celine looked across the hall, to where Daniel stood, wounded but alive, leaning quietly against a pillar. For a moment, she simply gazed at him, her heart full. Then she turned back to her people. She walked to the throne. But before sitting, she spoke clearly, her voice echoing through the chamber. "There is one who stood by me when I was nothing, who bled for me when I had no crown, no power, no future. He gave me courage when I had lost it." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Celine extended her hand toward Daniel. "Daniel Reed, come forward." He hesitated, confused, but the crowd parted. He stepped slowly toward her, his boots echoing on the marble floor. When he stopped before her, Celine smiled. "This man is not of our world, yet he has proven more loyal, more brave, and more human than any I have known." She turned to the court, her voice steady. "This man is my shield, and my heart." The hall erupted in whispers and gasps. Celine took his hand. "Daniel, will you stand beside me? Not as my protector, but as my partner, my equal." For once, Daniel was speechless. He simply looked at her, at the woman who had come to his door one stormy night, and felt everything fall into place. He nodded. "Always." Celine smiled through tears. "Then rise, Daniel Reed, as consort to the Queen of Valari." The hall filled with light as the crown was placed upon her head. Outside, the sun rose fully over the ruined city, washing the world in gold. And in that moment, among smoke, silence, and the echo of triumph, two souls who had once been lost finally found their home. From that night in the storm to the dawn of a new empire, their love endured. Dangerous, passionate, and eternal.